All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Mondays Down South. It has been forever. First of all, thank you, Michael Dolan, for sending out your weekly articles, which are awesome reads, and then also, subtly calling out MDS for not doing an episode. It was completely warranted because, guys, it's been what, 2 months of just not
Been a
necessarily
while.
a hiatus. Us three knuckleheads, we talk every day. We're talking sports at some point in time during the hour. We just haven't been able to collectively get back on and do the podcast. So, gentlemen, it's good to be back. Cy, Evan, how have you guys been doing? And any quick shout outs before we get into it?
I mean, it's funny that he throws it over to us, but I think people need to understand that in the last 2 months, a lot has happened in Mr. Zach Bakulik's life. He's repping that North Carolina life out now. I know he talked about it before,
Right.
but the move happened in between. And admittedly, we've all been keeping busy with holidays and just trying to enjoy ourselves in these weird times. So that's probably where the hiatus is. And then I think we got a little lazy from there, but we're excited to get right back into it in the new year. Besides, the NFL is ending, so we're gonna have to get a little more creative, and we can talk about a lot of things that we've missed out on. So I'm just excited to be back on, guys. Let's get the ball rolling. What you got?
Pumped to be back. A couple administrative notes for the viewers. As always, please subscribe to the channel. Check us out on Instagram as well, which we've been rolling out. And we're also on Spotify now as of the new year. So if that's easier for y'all to listen to and you don't have to look at our faces for better or for worse, you can check us out on Spotify as well. So starting with this episode.
This is great because I'm
follow us
just now
there.
learning. This is great because I'm just
News
now
to
learning
me.
where I'm Spotify.
Si, I told you this.
Spotify,
This was a
Si.
couple months ago.
No,
They got lost in the
you
shuffle.
said. No, I know you said we were going to roll it out, but we hadn't talked about the fact that you already got the approval. So I'm excited. This will be good. We'll get a little car. People daily driving, kind of even no commute. Maybe when you go to your daily feed, guys, you can turn us on for a little bit. We appreciate you.
And on that note, we're back on a different schedule now that the NFL is over. We're recording on Thursdays, so look out for the episodes on Mondays now, not Thursdays. So every Monday you'll get a new episode. But I think that's
Indeed.
all the administrative tidy up for 2021, gents.
Well, I guess that cadence finally makes sense since we're based down south, right? Might as well jump into it. And you did say now that the NFL is over, so let's just talk about the end of the NFL season. And I mean, it's the most pertinent thing there is. Super Bowl. I got to come out here before I even get called out and just admit how wrong I was, because I know I'm going to get called out, and admittedly, I deserve to get called out because there is no way I ever thought that the Tampa Buccaneers were going to be Super Bowl champions this year. I gave them a 0% chance. I thought there was no way it was going to happen because I just kept saying to myself, look at all these incredible teams in the NFC, and then even when you look at all the NFC teams, I just thought nobody was going to beat the Chiefs. And even if someone did beat the Chiefs, I thought it was going to be a team in the AFC like the Bills or somebody was really make it happen, right? I did not have faith in the Buccaneers winning. And the other thing is they didn't even win their division. So, I mean, they were on the road for the majority of the playoffs, actually the entire playoffs, and got to the Super Bowl and then happened to play at home in the Super Bowl, which is the craziest thing that I've ever seen. So I'll tee it up. I'll say I was super wrong. I will be honest. The game was not very fun for me. And it's not just because I'm not the biggest Brady fan, but I think a lot of people would agree that it was just genuinely a boring game. I think the most fun part about that game, I mean, if you can call it fun, is Patrick Mahomes running more circles in a NASCAR race. I think it's probably the most enthralling thing, and crazy throws he was making when he was falling over, falling backwards and getting into his receiver's hands, and they weren't the conversions weren't happening. That's really what I take away from that game. But that's all I'm going to say for now, and then I'll rebuttal based on what you guys have to say. But Zach, I'll kick it over to you, man. What'd you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Cy, you shouldn't be too hard on yourself, man, because the Buccaneers were a roller coaster ride throughout the season, which made them really an enjoyable team. I mean, we saw, initial success with Tampa Bay. I think they jumped out to a 3-1 record, and then they had periods of uncertainty throughout the midway part of the season. They even had public clashes between Bruce and Tom Brady as they're both trying to get on the same page. And then obviously, much like I would say Tampa Bay and Baltimore were the two teams that completely changed their trajectory towards the end of the season. But I mean, you shouldn't be too hard on yourself because going into the playoffs, I thought there were about 5 or 6 AFC teams that could have beat the best team being the Green Bay Packers in the NFC. Baltimore, Pittsburgh was undefeated. If we remember, for 11 straight weeks. Tennessee was undefeated for quite a while as well. I mean, they ended up being a relatively good team. And then you have obviously the AFC champions and the Kansas City Chiefs, and then the Buffalo Bills with a 33 season. So, I mean, when you look at the stacked AFC this year, it was easy to ignore maybe some of these, perennial threats in the NFC division, provided, Green Bay not going. So I thought it was a stellar season. First of all, hats off to the NFL for completing a season. I was looking at the statistics from a COVID standpoint. They tested players, or there were 960,000 COVID tests administered, and I think only 282 positive tests. So, they definitely had to deal with a fair share of crises and reshuffling games, but hats off to them for playing all 16, or every team playing the 16-game season and then going to the playoffs. So yeah, it was a great season, fantastic season. I'm kind of with Sai that the game was hard to get into just because it was never really a game after the first. I mean, I think Kansas City went up 3-0, and then after that, it was Brady just did Brady things in the Super Bowl. But regardless, I do think for the best teams in, I would have liked to see Buffalo go this year, but I'm really hoping for them next year. Kicking it over to E. E, what'd you think about the game, man?
Yeah, like you guys said, the game was the game. Unfortunately, it didn't go, I think, how we wanted to get a competitive game out of it. But I mean, you just got to give the Bucs credit. You got to give Tom credit. I think we knew they were going to be one of the most talented teams in the league all year. I don't think we thought it would come together so quickly. And then you look at the playoffs, like their run through the playoffs. I was just thinking about this earlier today. The only home game they played was in the Super Bowl. I mean, like, for them to go on the road and win all those games at Lambeau, like against the Saints on the road. And I think it just comes down to, like, they're probably maybe other than the Chiefs, the most talented team, just with those weapons and, like, just all across the board. And then the leadership factor, obviously, with Brady having been there before, like, you start to read some of the stuff about how he was texting his teammates like every day over that 2-week period that they're going to win the game, and like that kind of stuff. And just that leadership of having been there before and, kind of changing that culture, I think is what got it done. So it's a shame the Chiefs couldn't put up much more of a fight, but I mean, give credit to the Bucs.
No, Ev, you made a really good point. And I was like, in the future, I was like, do we need to enact some sort of like, because this has never happened, and admittedly they got there, so they deserve to play at home. But like, it's kind of ridiculous that a team got to play a home game in the Super Bowl. And of course, like, I'm not saying that the Chiefs would have won if that wasn't the case. I'm not even saying that. It just blows my mind that that's even a possibility, right? Because like, you could go 16 and I still think the Super Bowl should be a neutral site game. But at the same time, they knew Tampa was in the Super Bowl this year and they got there. So I can't take anything away from it. It just blew my mind that was the case. But it is really funny they were on the road. One thing that I want to point to is they won the Chiefs game pretty decidedly. And I think a big part of that, and we could talk about this too, is Eric Fisher being out. I did not know how big of a difference that was going to make, but oh my gosh, that offensive line was good. And admittedly, it would have still been tough for that offensive line, but Fisher is their left tackle, and they shuffled their entire line around. So it was like 3 guys in 3 new spots. And that, I think, completely changed the game because Tyreek Hill, for example, was like a mute point. And it wasn't just because they had good corners on him. It was because Mahomes had time to get ball and, down the field. And then Kelsey could barely get his breaks because they weren't having the time. Like, Mahomes was literally running around in circles. The part that gets me, though, more than the Super Bowl is I'm not going to use the word frustrated, but I'm kind of shook by the Saints and the Packers because they both very easily, maybe I shouldn't say very easily, both won their respective game against the Buccaneers. They had many opportunities to capitalize on those games. And it wasn't even just like Brady and the Bucs playing well in that game. It was them blowing their opportunities in both of those games. Like the Packers, I think, had like 4 different opportunities to score a touchdown where they didn't. And we're talking about a team that couldn't not score. And then if you look at the Saints, it's a team that straight up steamrolled the Buccaneers last time they played. That was with Drew Brees. Like, as much as you want to say Drew Brees regressed, and you guys were right, I'm not disagreeing. He did regress. They steamrolled that team with Drew Brees earlier in the season. And then in that game, they came out and, like, first half, everything was fine. It was competitive. It was close. They had the lead toward the game. And Jared Cook fumbles a football, and then they never look back, and the Bucs took that one. So I was, even more than the Super Bowl, I was really surprised by the Saints and the Packers at home losing their respective games, because it just seemed like that wasn't just as much the Bucs beating them as much as it was them like allowing themselves to get beat by like not capitalizing on opportunities that you normally expect them to. So that's one takeaway I had more than anything, because the Chiefs game, like, that was the Bucs. Like, I mean, straight up, the Bucs were just a better team that day, and I really don't think there's much else that Chiefs team could have done, because of course, like, that offensive line was getting steamrolled. That D line and that linebacking core for the Buccaneers is just absurd. Like, there's no way to put it. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, one thing you did mention, Cy, like, it didn't seem like there was anything the Chiefs could do. And one thing I find funny is Eric Bieniemy was arguably the top market guy for a head coaching position, and it didn't manifest. And I think the main reason, despite the fact that the guy is unbelievably talented from an offensive plane or an offensive scheme, Andy Reid was still calling those plays. So I think a lot of people, or a lot of teams that were looking to hire new coaches, they wanted to stand down a little bit on Eric Bieniemy, but he was at one point the hottest guy on the market. And what it's funny is, look at Byron Leftwich, who was the OC, and then Todd Bowles, the DC for Tampa Bay, and both of them outshined many of the head coaches in the entire league. I mean, Todd Bowles beating Andy Reid in chess, and then obviously Byron Leftwich calling unbelievable plays, getting Leonard Fournette involved early. I thought crucial to Tampa Bay's just them starting to control the ball, control the field, and then ultimately controlling the game. I thought both of those guys deserved head coaching positions more than Bieniemy or some of the other guys that just recently got hired. So we'll end up seeing what happens next year. But I mean, I thought it was a really impressive performance by both of those guys. And obviously Bruce Arians, well-deserved. He's a Hokie, so I'm happy that he finally got his Super Bowl.
Well, you can say that Bowles was a head coach already. He got that chance. And who knows, maybe down the road he will again, but didn't go too hot. And then the other thing is, you talk about Leftwich, but it's the same situation for Leftwich as it is for Bieniemy, in that Bruce Arians on offensive plays, right? It's the same kind of situation when you talk about a grand scheme-wise. My question, and Ev, of course, I want to give you a chance. I'm just curious, like, and I want you to answer this as well, Ev, is it even on Andy Reid? Like, do we feel like he wasn't calling the right plays? I don't even know if it's the plays, right? Like, it genuinely feels like there's nothing they could do, because you couldn't really run the ball because offensive line couldn't block, and their D line and their run defense is arguably the best in the NFL. And you couldn't throw the ball because you had no time. Your offensive line couldn't block. It felt like the Seahawks against the Broncos, you know, when Peyton and that unstoppable offense got to the Super Bowl, and then the Seahawks just straight dismantled them at the line, gave them no time, and all of a sudden this team that offensively couldn't be stopped was just completely, you know, at a loss for rhythm and couldn't get anything done. That's how I felt. But I'll ask you guys that. Do you feel like it was coaching as much as, or do you feel like it was more genuinely just play on the field?
I would say it's a little both. I do think the biggest impact was Fisher, for sure. Like you mentioned earlier, like just their inability to block with him out was the biggest thing. But you can point to their like refusal to run the ball pretty much throughout the whole game. And I will say, going into the game, I would have done the same thing and just said, you know what, screw the run game, because Tampa Bay has one of the best run Ds in the league, and just drop back and throw, 50, 60 times. But there was a point in the middle of that game where I think coming out of the first half, and they kind of started to run the ball a little bit and have success with it, because Tampa Bay was just playing that double high safety to prevent the deep ball with Hill, which is another huge factor in that game. And they started to have success with it, and then they just kind of came away from it. And, if they kept up the run game, I think that was maybe their only chance for them to hopefully drop down one of those safeties and then be able to pop the top with Hill a little bit. But realistically, I don't think with how little blocking they did, they really had much of a chance, to be honest with you. So I think they could have run the ball more in hindsight. But, I don't know. I think they just got beat.
Yeah, it's a stacked roster, to say the least. And I was curious after the Super Bowl victory. I looked up the salary cap positions for not this year but next year. Tampa Bay is not even in cap hell next year. Like that might be, to some people, like I don't feel like they understand that, but they have everyone under a reasonable salary. Tom Brady making 2-year, 50 million guarantee, but he's only 25 million a year in comparison to, I don't know, compared to another team in the NFC South, the Atlanta Falcons owing Matt Ryan 40 mil next year. I mean, when you talk about like lean production for the guys that you have, the Bay has done a phenomenal job of it. And I even think they can maintain some of those guys next year if they want. If you look at the free agency element of Tampa Bay, do you think any of these guys walk? You got Leonard Fournette coming up in free agency, Chris Godwin, Shaquille Barrett, Ndamukong Suh, Levante David. I mean, they have a variety of star players that could walk, and you definitely know that there will be higher offers from other organizations based on what they saw on the field just in that final game. Sal, maybe I'll kick this over to you first. Do you think Tampa Bay is able to maintain all of those guys for current or maybe slightly higher salaries than they're currently making, or do you think they'll walk?
I think it depends on what state of like their career they're in, right? Like Brady, you saying the 2-year 50 million. It's because like the 25 mil is like, just, I don't want to call it chump change because $25 million is $25 million, but like the dude's been making stacks for years, and of course he's big discount to be able to play. And the thing with Brady and guys like Brady and Manning and Breeze and guys like that is they've been taking discounts for a long time because for them winning is more important than earnings at this point, because between their branding and everything that they've done, they're clearly set for life, and they know even after the fact they'll be making plenty of money. So that's the thing with Brady. I don't think that's going to happen with like all their star players. Like Chris Godwin isn't about to take a big discount because it's his first big contract that he's going to be able to get. If I'm him, I'm trying to cash out. You're playing in the NFL, dude. Nothing is guaranteed. Like you never know how long your career is going to last, especially at skill positions. Like it's one thing to play quarterback. You can play quarterback for 20 years. We're seeing it with Brady. We see it with a lot of other guys. But skill positions like wide receiver, running back, these other positions where you're getting taking more hits out there. Like you want to cash out, and I believe Godwin's going to cash out. I believe I don't know what Evans' contract situation is, but I'm sure he's going to try to cash out. AB obviously could re-sign. I mean, he just wanted to get that ring and he got it, so he's probably content. I look at guys like Fournette, like he probably is going to want to go get a deal now because obviously I don't think he felt like he was very respected with the way things went down in Jacksonville. There's just a lot of guys like Ronald Jones. Eventually, when he comes off his contract, he's going to want to get paid. Like running backs have to get paid when they can get paid because everybody. You see what's happening with the market for running backs. Even the top guys getting a lot of money because people know that the lifespan of running back in the NFL, as far as how long they can play, is just shorter than other positions. So I think all these guys are going to try to get paid, with the exception of like the absolute vets. Like we're talking to Jason Pierre-Paul's on the line. Like they're probably more willing to like take those pay cuts, like Ndamukong Suh, because their whole thing is they just want to win, right? Like they're already making the money they want to make, and they've been making the money. They just want to win. So that's where the discrepancy is for me. I just think that's smart strategy too, because if I was an NFL player and I was a skill position player, like I already got my ring. Like it's one thing if they want to run it back, but I got my ring. So it's like, now I want my bag, and I'm going to be a happy camper for the rest of my career. That's always been my mentality.
And in terms of Godwin, it'll be hard for them to let him go for sure, but they also are pretty deep at receiver. Like I would expect AB to probably re-sign just because of his relationship with Brady. I don't think it'll be too expensive. And then Mike's there, but with Scotty Miller could take on a bigger role now, and Tyler Johnson as well looked good at times this year that they just drafted. So it would suck to let go of Godwin, but I think it's going to be tough for them to keep him again with the money they're going to have to compete with from some other teams. And they are pretty deep at the, skill position in general, but specifically wide receiver. So we'll have to see that.
Gronk will do.
Who the heck knows with him?
He's the biggest wild card, right? Like,
yeah.
Admittedly, I came into the season and I said in fantasy football, remember when we were talking fantasy football guys, I was like, dude, I would not draft Gronk. And you know what? I wasn't completely wrong because he finished as the tight end 8 in fantasy football. So it's not like he was like a stud in that, but clearly when he needed to show up, he showed up. Like you saw, like he got, what do you have, 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl? Like the dude, or he was having 2. I think he had 1. The dude,
he had 2.
Did he get a second? You see, that's Brady and Gronk, dude. Like basically, he rounded into shape by the Super Bowl and decided to beat Gronk of Gronk. I don't know, but that'll be an interesting situation. I think basically, I'm gonna guess Gronk will play as long as Brady decides to play, and then he'll peace out again. That's That's probably what I would do if I were him. Like, let me just like play with my guy, go in a couple more if I can, and then get out. But well, let me ask you guys this though: do you think the Bucks are favorites next year? Like coming into next year, like just if you're assuming.
I personally don't think so. I think they're going to lose a variety of talent, like we just mentioned. I think there's also going to be teams that just systematically improve. I think Kansas City got kicked in the teeth. Right now, they're probably not happy. There's I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if Mahomes is watching film already right now. I think they're going to be extremely hungry. I think Buffalo is going to come in even more improved than they were last year because I don't think they're really going to lose a lot of guys, especially on the deep front. And then I also think there's going to be teams like Tennessee and Baltimore that just get one step better than they were last year. So I wouldn't say the Bucks are the favorites, but they could very well be the favorites in the NFC. I just think the AFC, man, they're just going to get even more talented. So I will say Buffalo, or I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win the NFC South next year, hands down. I don't think that's a competition. They're not going to be playing a wild card game. They're going to be in it.
Yeah, I did chuckle at how you just rolled through all the AFC East teams, which is AFC teams, which is 100% fair. But yeah, I think in terms of the NFC, they probably have to be the favorites. Green Bay, assuming Aaron is there, maybe is more of a favorite. But the way they've disappointed in the playoffs, like it's hard to really pick them over the Bucks. And I would say maybe Rams with Stafford are my maybe who I would actually pick, but I don't think they should be the favorites. But yeah, I think those are your three you're probably looking at right now.
That tees up a great conversation point too, because like I would say even this year, even with the Bucks winning the Super Bowl, I still think that there were probably about 3 to 4 teams that were probably better teams in terms of like the difference throughout the entire season and talent, right? Like the best team doesn't always win the Super Bowl, in my opinion. The team that deserves to win the Super Bowl wins the Super Bowl, and that's what happened this year because the Bucks, like, they just showed up when they needed to show up. But do I believe that overarchingly they were a better team than like the Packers and the Saints and the Chiefs at full health and somebody else? I don't know if I do believe that. And that's the thing with the NFL, right? It's like when the Giants win the Super Bowl or like teams like that win the Super Bowl. Like if you show up when you're supposed to show up and you get hot at the right time, like you can make it happen because it's one game at a time. And I genuinely don't think, even with their current roster, I don't know that they would be the favorites like overwhelmingly coming out next season. I still think the Chiefs are probably coming into next season. But again, I'm with you guys in the sense of NFC seems like it's going to be a little bit easier than it was this year for the top teams with the Saints, seeing what's going to happen with the Saints, the QB carousel that's going on right now. Like, and that's what I was going to bring up next because I think that's great. Like AFC's got a lot of loaded teams, but the quarterback are going ever right now. The Stafford thing was what I was going to mention. Ev, great point there. The Rams could be scary with Matt Stafford because they've always had the weapons. They have an incredible head coach, and as far as like offensive-minded head coach goes, and then defensively, you saw how ridiculous that team was. You're talking Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, arguably 2 best players at their respective positions. Their defensive year for Aaron Donald, like they got some good like linebackers to supplement. Like that team doesn't really have a lot of weaknesses. Their biggest weakness this past season was just getting consistent quarterback play from Goff, who is no longer there. Let me ask you guys this though. The QB price there was really interesting. What did you guys think of that? Like the trade was Jared, I believe it was 2 first-round picks and the third, I think, for Stafford, and maybe I think it was like another supplemental day 3 pick or something like that. When I first got that news, I was like, because I obviously as a Colts fan, I wanted Stafford. Like I really, really, really wanted Stafford to be a Colt, but I would have never asked for Chris Ballard, nor would Chris Ballard ever pay that price, right? Like there's no way he's paying that price. Like, you know, so I was shook by it. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think of that trade?
I probably go first. I actually think it's a good trade for both teams. Now it is funny when you look at the statistics of the Los Angeles Rams overpaying for that star talent. It's just a part of that Hollywood industry where they're just like, oh, who wants a first or second round pick? Oh, here you go. They're just shelling it out over the last couple of years. I think they've given up like 7 or 8 first round picks in like the last 5 or 6 years.
For Goff alone.
Yeah.
They paid like 4 to get him, and they paid 2 to ship him out.
Yup, pretty much.
True.
But I think it's a good trade for both teams. The reason I think it's a good trade for the Rams is I think as their team, you know, they've kind of maintained a lot of their talent for a couple of years, like Aaron Donald, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Jalen Ramsey's, you know, just finally got his big deal. So as like this team really starts to develop into their prime form, I think they need a veteran presence to be able to get them to the Super Bowl. Or I mean, I guess Goff got them to the Super Bowl, but I think to push them past that level and potentially win it. So I think it was a big risk, but a smart risk for the Los Angeles Rams. And I also think it was a good trade for Detroit because they got 2 first-round picks. They have a quarterback that I've always pretty much been a fan of. I mean, he had that phenomenal year. You know, you could argue it was McVay's system. I certainly think that played a part, but he's a great play action guy and he's got a phenomenal arm, and they can really start to build this offense and I would say maybe in Detroit more defense, but they have guys like DeAndre Swift. We'll see if they re-sign Kenny G. I don't think they will. But I think they're going to build their defense up with those first round picks, and hopefully Detroit gets back up into full form. I mean, obviously their coach is a nutcase. I nothing but respect for that guy, but I think it's a great trade for both teams, and we'll see what happens. Ev, what do you think?
Yeah, I certainly am going to make fun of the Rams for all the picks they traded to get Goff, and then the fact that they gave up 2 to basically swap quarterbacks with an older other number 1 first round pick. But I also am in no way going to knock them for this trade. I think people don't realize that Matthew Stafford is not that old. He still has, 5+ good years left, I would say. The contract is reasonable. And we talked a lot, I think, over the last few weeks about teams that are like just a quarterback away. Like obviously the Colts are a great example of that. Like Washington needs more, but it's kind of a similar idea of like the biggest need is the quarterback. Yep. And we didn't really talk about the Rams in that way because I think a lot of us just assumed that they would just keep rolling with Goff. But the Rams are truly the best example of that, and that like bringing in Stafford, it's like, I mean, that's the last piece to the puzzle, I would say. So, it was a lot to give up, but it's hard to argue with them pulling the trigger on that. And I think Stafford with those weapons is going to be lights out, man. I think, we all love Stafford. I think he's been undervalued over the course of his career, just being stuck in Detroit. So I'm excited to see how that plays.
It's funny because when you see the haul, right? Like first saw the haul, I was like, what? Like, I was like, well, like, because I'm sitting there the whole time thinking, oh, maybe the Colts got a good shot at this. Like, maybe we got it. And I saw the haul and I was like, ain't no damn way that we would have given that haul. But then I took like a couple minutes and I think about it, and it made perfect sense. Like, I don't know that I've ever seen a more perfect trade for 2 teams in the way that it was out, because yeah, the Rams gave up 2 picks, but they gave up $30 million worth of a year on cap space for Jared Goff that they now can use on Stafford. And I believe Goff was more expensive than Stafford was, right? So it's even additional money that they can use on like retaining somebody they already have or signing somebody new. And the other thing for them is they don't feel that they need any more pieces, right? And like Ev said, Stafford is not that old. So if you get, let's say 4 to 5 years of good play from Stafford, then those first round picks probably aren't worth as much as they would be anyway. Still first round picks. So I'm not saying that trading away doesn't mean anything, but basically Stafford gives you that ability to potentially win a Super Bowl in the next 4 years if you could retain these guys. So in that way, it's great for the Rams, even though they lose the picks. Flip side of that is Detroit. I don't even know if it's like they're sold on Goff as much as it is they're like, we're going to get these picks anyway. If Goff plays well, we got 2 scenarios. If he picks it up and figures it out, we got a guy to build around. If he plays well enough that like we're like, still getting decent picks, we trade him and try to get even more back for him. Like, because if a quarterback does even marginally well, they're worth like a second round pick, right? So they could turn it into even more picks. And worst comes to worst, he doesn't play well and they're rebuilding anyway. So their picks will just get more valuable now that they have multiple first round picks in the next 2 years. So ultimately, I think it's a win-win for both teams. And in this situation, it makes a lot of sense. And I truly think that Stafford, I'm just happy for him because he deserves to be on a team where he gets an opportunity to really, really compete, because it seems like at different points of his career, like he's had like some supporting cast here and there. Like obviously guys like Calvin Johnson were amazing for him. But then on the flip side of that, he's had very little help on the defensive end. And that dude had no run game at all. And I'm so excited to see what Cam Akers, Matt Stafford, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and that offense do together next year. It's going to be really fun to watch. Let me throw it to something else, though, because we're talking about quarterbacks. What do you guys think of this Eagles asking for 2 first-round picks for Carson Wentz? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm so – but I really want your thoughts on this because that had me cracking up.
Yeah, they're completely delusional, and you can just tell panic has set in Philadelphia because they are so far inundated in cap space coming into coming into next season. And so, usually when when organizations panic, they try to give the impression that they're asking for a lot because they have these high quality assets that they're paying a lot of money for. So this is just a pure negotiation tactic. There is no way in hell that Philadelphia gets 2 first-round picks for Wentz. I definitely think he will go somewhere. I think there's going to be a team that believes the arm is still there. That, the old Wentz is still there, and he can be rejuvenated with the right offensive scheme. I just think he's lost his confidence. So, I'm a fan of him going somewhere and hopefully being successful. But I guess my question to you guys is, would you want to see him in Indianapolis or Washington at this point? I mean, most likely going to stay at Dallas, even though Dallas is doing a horrible job committing or not committing to this player. I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but Dallas just posted a hype video on their Instagram, and Dak Prescott was not included at all. I mean, what is Dallas doing? Don't give up on your superstar here. You need to sign Dak. But if Dak stays in Dallas, does Indianapolis and Washington go after Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, or Deshaun Watson?
Okay, so go ahead first.
I'm going to say that's a lot to unpack. I'll go name by name here. Carson Wentz. I think the biggest concern with Wentz, and basically in terms of what I want for a Washington quarterback, he's the exact opposite. One, the biggest concern is that his teammates hated him. That's a lot of the stuff that came out as this has rolled on. And when there was that rumor that came up about the Bears having already done the trade for him, and Miles Sanders goes on, I forget which social media platform, but he's like, "Oh, we're going to the Super Bowl now." It's hard to say if that was exactly about that, but the timing was 5 minutes after that, Schefter tweet or whatever came out. I'm pretty sure Wentz's teammates hated him, and he's a horrible leader. So, and he's not accurate. Turns the ball over a lot, which are basically the 3 things I want out of my next quarterback. Is a good leader that maybe isn't that explosive, but he's accurate and he doesn't turn the ball over. So I have no interest in Carson Wentz. I think he's done mainly because of those leadership problems. I think the talent's there. I think he could figure it out. I think confidence, he can get that back. But if his teammates truly do hate him and he's as uncoachable as people said, that is something you can't fix, in my opinion. So, and in terms of the other names, Matt Ryan, I don't think it's available, right? Nor do I want him.
He is, but it doesn't seem like they're going to be traded. His contract is horrible because we backloaded it, so we're paying him $40+ million for the next 2 years. But if you want him, please take him. We'll give you anything for him.
No, I think they said they're going to hold on to Matt Ryan and Julio. It might just be because they can't trade the contract of Matt Ryan. Of course, there'd be Julio takers, but we'll see. I mean, I think the Colts would definitely be in on Matt Ryan if he was available. I mean, we're going to be in anybody that has the potential to come in and win games. I will say this: if there is a perfect place for Carson Wentz to go, I believe with 100% certainty that he would be better with the Colts than he was with the Eagles, because Frank Reich is the perfect coach for him to play under. I mean, that's the thing, right? Frank Reich was Doug Peterson's and Doug Peterson's OC, and it was in this that good old Josh McDaniels gave us the old boot and rally kind of situation, because we ended up with a much better head coach, in my opinion. There's no way Josh McDaniels could have done what our team with Frank Reich has done. And there's a reason they call him a QB whisperer, dude. Doesn't matter who he has as quarterback, they get better. Every single person he's ever coached, started as a coach, he was a quarterback. As an OC, every single person he coaches gets better. Philip Rivers went from the Chargers, everybody questioned him. We almost beat the Bills in the first round of the playoffs and won 11 games with Philip Rivers. Frank Reich makes everybody better. And Carson Wentz, when he won his MVP, a lot of people, especially now, were pointing to the fact that his success very much tied to Frank Reich because they were very, very close in the sense of Reich has complete confidence in him, and Wentz feeds off of that. And the design, the play calls, and everything like that, they just kind of go hand in hand together. So all that being said, do I think Carson Wentz could come to the Colts, and do I think we could be successful with them? I do, because I have that much faith in Frank Reich, and I have much faith in the team around him with the offensive line that we would give him, because he would not be getting mauled in the backfield. I think we would acquire another receiver to help him out, and I think we still have that defense, right? So yeah, all that being said, yes, it'd be great to have him there. Do I want to give up 2 first-round picks and pay that contract for it? No, not even a little bit. Like, the only way we make that trade is if the Eagles give us like another player and we get we get more future potential out of it. Like if we get another offensive lineman, if we get another playmaker or something of that nature, maybe we consider it then. But there's no way we give up 2 first-round picks and then also take on over $30 million a year for Carson Wentz. So I would happily like it if it was a fair, reasonable deal, because I think we could win with them. But ultimately, I wouldn't do it at the price point that they're asking for, and nor do I think that anybody's going to give them that price point. So